If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. I've got a really big show for you today. We have Dawn Schiller. She's the author of the book, The Road Through Wonderland, Surviving John Holmes. You might recall John Holmes was the 1970s porn actor, and later on became involved in the Wonderland murders over there on Wonderland Avenue in Laurel Canyon. Dawn is also the head of this group called EmpowerTeens.com, and she's offering a special, I guess you might call it a special deal, or a special offer, where you could go to her website, EmpowerTeens.com, and get a special autographed copy of her book, The Road Through Wonderland, Surviving John Holmes. So, Dawn, are you there?
Hi, Ed. How are you? I'm here.
I'm very good, and thank you very much for coming on the show. And people might want to go check out, too, OppermanReportBlogspot.com, because we've got a picture of Dawn. Beautiful woman. Just really has that real glow about her, you know? It's going to...
Now I know why everybody says they love you.
That's right. Yeah, you're friends with Jackie Hollander, one of my favorite guests, right? Who got mixed up there with another one, with James Brown. She went through some kind of a...
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to do a shout out to her. And, you know, we met through the Survivor Circle. And oftentimes, you know, being in that circle, you're privy to some of the stories that nobody really wants to hear. And boy, does she have one, I'll tell you.
Yeah, the first time she was on, you know, we were just talking about, you know, getting the whole story. But then she started going into the, you know, the attack. And it was just brutal. So, yeah. Dawn, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? Who is Dawn Schiller?
Who is Dawn Schiller? Well, let's see. She's somebody who just had coffee, and she probably shouldn't have, because I just thought I needed to be alert on this beautiful sunny Saturday afternoon. Let's see. How do I identify myself? Probably as a mother, a survivor, an activist, a teacher, an advocate. All of those things I've kind of come to step by step. And I guess we're here probably to talk about my story as it unraveled surrounding John Holmes, and maybe why I wrote the book, why I felt the story was important, and kind of dispel some myths out there. So does that, I must be echoing because they're giving me a signal here.
No, I think we'll be okay now. I turned down my headset just a little tiny bit. Okay. Your speakers, you might want to turn down your speakers just a bit too, unless you have some headsets.
I don't have any headsets. Is that better?
It's better for me. And Danny will tell if there's a problem.
Okay.
We were talking off the air, and you mentioned how you had a 16-year-old daughter, right?
Yeah, I have a beautiful 16-year-old daughter. Amazing that I have a daughter, a child at all. So it's one of my greatest gifts to be a mom, I think.
I totally agree with you. When I found out my wife was having a baby, I said, I'm threw my life into this, into raising this kid, and thank God everything went good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like it was. She came from heaven, and actually her name is Jade, so it means stone from heaven. So, I really believe that. I think that, especially given, as a survivor of somebody who, my experience of running into and meeting John Holmes when I was 15 years old, by accident, really. Some people say it was a fate or whatever you want to call it, and going through a lot of trauma, a lot of beatings, a lot of abuse. I never thought I could have children. So when I suddenly became pregnant at 38, it was quite a shock and a great joy.
Very interesting. I had my daughter when I was 37. They were 38, right around that same time. So yes, okay, great. Now, but the point I was trying to make though about our daughters being 15 and 16 is that's how old you were when you got hooked up with this guy.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good way to bring it to an awareness. We always say, what if it happened to your child? Look at your child. And that really brings it home to folks. But think about it that way is really good. I think I've been the mother that I am because I know what's out there and what could potentially harm her. And I know the reasons that I fell through, and I didn't have the best parenting. My parents were divorced. My father was a disabled Vietnam vet. He had disappeared for a while. We were in Florida, and my mother wasn't from this country. She's a German national, so she didn't have a grasp of the language. She struggled. She worked really hard, 3 waitress jobs to keep us together. And, when Dad came back from Southeast Asia after almost 7 years gone, and announced that he wanted a divorce, I was 15, and it broke my mother's heart. And, we really expected the hero to come back and save the family, but he was pretty broken because of the war himself. And getting into the story a little bit, he, we made the decision. He says, we're divorcing. I want to take, I'm going to go to California. There's 3 of us, 2 girls and a boy, my sister Terry, my brother Wayne. And he says, who you want to go with? And my sister and I said, well, we'll go with you, Dad. We were older. I was 15, my sister's 14. And my brother was much younger and stayed with my mom. And we basically off of, food stamps kind of traveled, like the Beverly Hillbillies, cross country and camped out and ate bologna sandwiches and, had really no plan to go anywhere except for Dad had a Thai wife, or a woman that he wanted to marry in the States. He was already married to her in Thailand. It's a little complicated. The marriage system is different over there. And I had another brother, unbeknownst to me, a Thai brother. And he was coming to California because he was bringing them over. And but he didn't have any money. And during that time, what happened was he developed this weird cancer just before we're about to move, literally about a month before we're going to move. That grew on his face, on his nose, actually. And it was so fast growing that the doctors had to go and radically remove his entire nose from his face. So here we are going cross country, my sister and myself and my dad and my father with a bandaged head, driving across with little money to try and meet up and connect with my father's other family.
How old was your dad?
My father was, all right. So if I was 15, he would have been 35. Yeah.
Okay. And so then, then how did you wind up running into John Holmes?
All right. Well, we were traveling across country and, Dad, when Dad came back too, after being gone almost 7 years, he had hair to his shoulders. He was this cool guy. And you got to remember in the 70s, it was all about freedom and flower power and, and my neighborhood, actually, to be honest with you, was really bad. It was a really tough neighborhood. We got our asses kicked a lot. And, we kind of struggled to survive, but a lot of us kids smoked weed, and we smoked weed, and skipped school, we were kind of just latchkey kids, you know what I mean? We didn't have anybody watch. My mom was working her waitress jobs. We didn't have anybody watch out for us. So it was a bad neighborhood. We were hiding out. We didn't want to get into fights. And so we just hung out with the stoners.
I know exactly what you mean. I grew up in the Bronx, okay?
Okay.
Now, what year are we talking about here? What year?
We're talking about 1976, and even before that, the neighborhood was bad, from 70. It was a very just tough neighborhood. I met a fellow years later that said he was a cop, and he was a retired cop. And I said, "Oh, really? Where did you used to patrol?" And he says, "Oh, Carroll City, Florida," which is the town I was from. And I said, "Oh my gosh, that was where I'm from." I said, "How did you manage to be a cop in that area?" He said, "It's the only place I ever got my ass kicked."
Wow.
So it's a tough neighborhood, just to be, I guess downplayed a little bit. It was really bad. So historically, you can go. It's called Miami Gardens now, if anybody wants to look it up. But
And they probably had some pretty decent pot back then in Florida down those days, right? Because it was all coming up from Columbia, from Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, at the time it was like, I don't know. It wasn't like today. Today is I guess it's super expensive. I don't smoke. I'm clean and sober almost 18 years, so I don't know what the world's doing around that anymore. But I hear now it's legal in Oregon, so who knows what they're doing? I don't know. But
back in those days, it was about $35 an ounce. Back in so you figure $10 for a quarter ounce.
Yes, that's what makes it. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. So and it was an ounce, and you could get a dime and a nickel, and that was like a lot. Now, like you get a seed, and it costs you like your first one or something. I don't know. But I don't, like I said, I don't know. But now you go to the store and pay taxes on it, I guess.
Yeah, they got scientists in lab growing this stuff these days.
Sure. So anyway, my dad came back and he was cool. He had hair down. I knew right away that he got high, and he knew right away that we did too. And he looked at me and he said, "Do you got any weed?" And so we got high right away. So that was it. We were stoned. I mean, we were stoned a lot. I remember that was it. And I thought I had the coolest dad in the world. And I couldn't go to school unless I had rolled him some because he wasn't good at it. And I had all this pride around, oh my gosh, I have to roll a really good joint for my dad because then he'll be proud of me, And I know it's very skewed. I mean, I'm not making excuses for my dad either, but those little things like that was important to me, and he wasn't a good dad. Let's just call it that. But anyway, we started traveling through, and the reason I got into the pot was to tell you that he kept looking at hitchhikers. We ran out of pot along the way, and so he says, "Well, we got to pick up somebody. We'll pick up somebody, and we'll get more," because he was really good at scamming too, my father. Right. And so we kept looking. He said, "What about that one, Dad?" And we'd see a hitchhiker because the 70s there was a lot of hitchhikers. Not like today. There was a lot more back then. I would say, "No, not that one. No, not that one." And then somewhere around Colorado, he says, "Yeah, let's pick up that guy." And he had long hair and he had a bag, a fringe bag and bell bottoms and probably a headband, And we pulled over and said, "Well, where are you going?" And the guy goes, "Well, I'm going to California. How far are you going?" And Dad says, "Well, we could go to California." So he says, "Yeah, if you take me to my girlfriend's, he says, "Well, do you have a place to stay there?" And he said, Dad goes, "Nope, just kind of go until we find something." And he says, "Well, if you take me all the way to my girlfriend's in Glendale," he says, "I'll see if she'll let you crash there for a couple days." And so it was like, well, cool man. And they got in and they became friends. And sure enough, he had marijuana and we were rolling up and smoking and we were in Glendale.
Was that John Holmes?
Well, we were in Glendale, and we went to to the 1010 East Acacia Avenue, and no, it wasn't John Holmes. His name is Marty. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, you don't know the story. So we get to his girlfriend's house, and it's a little cottages on Acacia Avenue, and she says, "Yeah, well, you can crash here. That's not a problem. Let me just call the manager and see if it's cool with him. But I'm sure it will be because he brings weed over all the time." And so anyway, she called him over to bring over a bag of weed and also to ask if we could stay. And in walks this guy, and it was John Holmes. He was the manager of the apartment building.
Now, was he already in movies then?
Yeah.
Oh, so he had a well-known name. Did you recognize his face?
No. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know, like the bad neighborhood I came from, the most I knew about porn was Playboy magazine.
And what about Linda Lovelace? So she was around. She was definitely around at that time, Linda Lovelace.
Was not around me.
No?
No, I never met her. Mm-mm.
No, but I mean like the name. She was famous on TV and stuff like that. People were talking about Deep Throat. They were talking about Linda Lovelace.
Yeah, I mean, you heard about that stuff, like, like you just kind of heard about it in passing or maybe like a sign or something. Mostly in California, Florida, in my neighborhood, we didn't hear any of that, to be honest with you. That really wasn't a big, I don't know, it just didn't show up then. I mean, as kids, I remember just the Playboy magazines and stealing them from somebody's dad, and then we'd all pass them around the neighborhood, like that was That was the biggest thing. But yeah, later on, I mean, you started to hear like something on the news about it, and but I'd never seen it, and I didn't know much about it, to be honest with you. And like that was still Greek to me, and I did not ever know who John was at all.
Yeah, he wasn't as famous. He didn't become more well known till years later. But
no,
yeah. But I remember Deep Throat. Yeah.
What I found out was that he was actually in his prime. He was actually his peak. He was already this character, Johnny Wad. And so I think part of it that I think that he took, well, the first thing he did when he walked in, just to give an idea of the kind of person he was, when he walked in to allow us to see whether or not he was going to let us stay, he took one look at me, looked me up and down, and he asked me how old I was. And I said, 15, why? And he said, too young. And he turned and walked off, as if, to me, it was as if why would that even be a question to you? Like, you just met this kid and you're assessing me sexually. You know what I mean? Like, it was very odd to me. And to be honest with you, when I met him for the first time, he had this really huge afro, and my sister and I thought he was the geekiest guy we'd ever seen in our lives. I mean, he had these little teeny tiny teeth, and he smiled a lot, and he kind of laughed a lot. What did he do? I mean, he had to be the center of attention wherever he went. And we would roll our eyes and go this guy is kind of he's weird. He's really weird. And he was all wrinkly, he was 32. And to me, that's an old guy, at 15, that's an old guy.
And he did that in front of your father?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he acted like that in front of my dad. And it was my dad was not a good dad. That's
okay.
Sad to say, but he wasn't a good dad. Needless to say, would anybody act like that in front of my daughter, in front of me? That would be a whole different story.
I don't even think nowadays people even have the guts to do that in front of it. You know what I mean? It was different back then. Things were different back then to begin with.
Well, everybody, I mean, because he had this idea of we're just cool and we all smoke weed together. Right. And it was about, screw the establishment still in the 70s type of thing, all the, breaking rules. And I don't know. But the gal that we stayed at, she said to me after he left, and probably a couple of days after we were staying there, she said, "Do you know who that is?" And I said, "No, I don't know who that is," because about that time I was a little sick of him, always wanting attention everywhere he went. I didn't really care. And so she goes, "Let me show you." And she opens her closet, and apparently she had all these marquees. And it was that's when I said, "Oh my gosh, this guy is this is I can remember marquees. One was Liquid Lips, and there was his face plastered with some kissing some other woman. And I can't remember what other ones, just the Johnny Wad ones. And I mean, she just had them all rolled up in her closet. So she probably had the movies too. I never watched the movies with her, but, so there you go. That was my introduction to who he was. And so I knew definitely, XXX was on there. I knew they had sex on film. I knew that's what it was. Had I ever seen one or seen him? No.
Then how did the thing start to develop between you two?
Yeah, well, what I realize now, especially in my advocacy, now that I've got an adult lens, a lens that understands power and control, a lens that understands, objectification and of women and girls, I can see that from that very first comment he made, about my age and being too young, as if I was too young to have sex or, have a relationship with, he was testing me. He was testing to see how far I would go. He was testing to see if I would get mad. He was testing to see who would get mad around him. He, you got to think in the mind of a predator, which, as time goes on, you will see how predatory he is, or he was.
Yeah, he was grooming. It was grooming you along.
Exactly. So from that very first moment, he initiated a grooming process. He initiated his he put his feelers out, and that's what they do. And so, quite frankly, he could have gotten anybody he wanted, but he wanted somebody he could control. And a 15-year-old girl who had no idea who he was somebody he could be whoever he wanted to me. And that I was a sponge. And so He tested even more. He started, he saw that we were really poor. He assessed us. He figured that we didn't have any money. A lot of times my sister and I were really hungry and we went without food, and I worried about her, but he brought food over. So he started being this person who would bring over sandwiches, and he said, the girls can start, doing odd jobs around the apartment complex. You can do some gardening, person's moving out, you can paint a little bit. And so we would earn some money. We'd earn some money as we started school. And I was starting the 10th grade and had no clothes. So he'd bring some clothes. Sometimes he'd bring, because he left every night. We'd always see his van pull out every night, his van pull out every night. And the other thing is he was living with a woman who was his wife, Sharon, who was a registered nurse who worked for the owner of the apartment complex. So it was that connection. They were both the managers. And he would tell everybody, well, Sharon and I were just kind of like brother and sisters, and that kind of, he fitted into that hippie, cool kind of way of living type of thing. Yeah. But she's really really straight laced, and she doesn't like to talk about this kind of stuff. So, and she doesn't smoke pot, and she doesn't get high. She doesn't do any of that. And so that's how I was introduced to Sharon. It was strange, but I mean, when you've got nothing else, that's what you got, he was, putting himself in a position where we would need him for food and for money, and, sometimes rides to school. And then he started waking me up every morning for school. He'd knock on the door. You ready? Are you ready? And then he started peeking in the window. My sister caught him several times, and so did I, like doing peeping Tom stuff at night. It was very creepy and weird, but he was a prowler. He was a natural prowler, let me tell you.
Now, wait a minute. Did your dad know that he was this porno guy?
Yeah, my dad knew. My father, mind you, he was... my father didn't have a lot going for him at the time either, I have to say. I think that he was really, I know he was hurting a lot. He had his bandages, every day. He literally had to change. I mean, when you looked at his face without the bandages, you looked straight into his sinus cavities. He had no nose. Right. And so he had bandage wrapped around his head every day, and he had to do a lot of doctor's appointments. He was in a lot of pain. So when John brought over the pot all the time, my dad was like, yeah, man, cool. That was great for him because he could just check out. He was organizing, though, to meet his Thai wife, and that would happen later on. So I think for him, in his mind, he was just biding his time. Also, I've talked to him since, and, he said that, I just didn't know, I hadn't seen you in a long time, and I just didn't know how to tell you, he just didn't know how to be authoritative is what he was trying to say to me at one point. But, he should have, but he didn't.
Okay. Now you said you caught him peeping in the windows a couple of times. And wasn't that like the last straw? He said, okay, now this guy's crossed the line, no?
Well, you're assuming that I had a lot of power. Okay. When you are in a position where you're hungry and this guy is the only guy that is bringing you food and clothes and, creating odd jobs, he started taking us around. Like he would always take my sister and I together. It was always a chaperone thing. But then he started being really he started to be really he started to look cute to me. He started to kind of treat me a little bit more special, like I'd get the bigger piece of the sandwich if we were camping and making food, or I don't know. He would bring me presents when he would come back. And one time it was a little ring. And so I started to feel like, maybe I like this guy. And he would tell me things like, I do that work and it's not really, it doesn't mean anything to me. It's just work. And, nobody really knows me and, they don't know who I am. And, nobody knew about Sharon anyway, from the whole porn world. Nobody knew he was married to a registered nurse. So he had this other side to him, and he became quite charming in my eyes because he started treating me really well, although very controlling. For instance, if I didn't come home from school, if I hung out with friends, if I dared to make other friends besides him, he would withdraw. He wouldn't talk to me for days. And so that meant no food, no extra food, no odd jobs, and that was it. So then you would feel the brunt of that. So, when you start taking that power away and you withhold things that are necessities.
So what about boys your own age?
Yeah, I tried. I mean, I tried to get to know some folks in the 10th grade, but like I said, I couldn't stay after or anything or hang out or do stuff afterwards, because then John would get mad. And I knew also at the oldest, if he got mad at me, that also meant that my sister didn't eat. So, I had this idea that, I better hurry and get home. So he was really very much in a very much a power and control way, very much in a batterer or an abuse situation way. I was becoming, I was running at his every whim, because he would either throw a fit, it would be a silent fit or something. And when he was very violent in a lot of ways. I would hear him sometimes have arguments with Sharon, and glass would break. I mean, the whole courtyard apartment complex would hear, and we would just look at each other going, well, something bad's happening over there. And I mean, literally stuff off the shelves would be flying. And then the next morning you would see sweeping up glass by the both of them. So it was, he was very much somebody who always had to have the attention and always had to be in control. He wanted to know where I was. He had a brother living in the apartment complex as well, who he always wanted to know where I was, if I came home. So all of that started closing in on me pretty quickly. And I mistook it for somebody who cared, because here I am, a kid that never had anybody who really cared, just kind of struggling on her own on the streets. And, a mom who was always bitter and, kicked our ass when she got home because she was tired and sad and, abandoned herself. And, I felt to me wow, look at that. He cares about me. He wants to know where I'm at. He doesn't want me to get hurt. All of those things started looking like compassion and love. And I know today that that's not love.
Okay. So here you got this guy, right? He's isolating you. He's using the fear factor, the carrot and the stick, little presents and all that stuff. He's got it down. Now, where did he learn that behavior from? Did it come naturally to him, or do you think there was a something else behind it?
Well, that's a good question. He comes from a very broken family himself. He came from a very broken family himself. His father was, I think, a raging drunk, and he actually was very violent with the kids. He had a stepfather that was violent with him. He would be the brunt of the stepfather's anger, and that was often stories that him and his brother would talk about. I think that traveled with him to his adulthood, that he needed to be in control, and that he ended up, because he never addressed the issues, he ended up being a perpetrator as well.
Now, do you think he was molested as a kid, and did he come from a military background?
He did not come from a military background. He left his abusive stepdad when he was a kid. I think he asked his mom to sign him in young, and he joined the army and went into the Signal Corps. And did 6 weeks in Germany or something to escape. So he very much was somebody that was I don't know if he was sexually molested. That really has never been talked about in the family, to be honest with you. He always turned it around and made it feel like he was the one that was the one that initiated things with older women. He always wanted to. He was such a liar. He always drew these grand stories. You never really knew what to believe. So he was delusional in a lot of ways. And I mean, historically, if you want to Google his lies, you can read all kinds of crazy crap that he would say.
Yeah, I saw some of that stuff. Yeah.
He graduated, summa cum laude from UCLA. He never went to college. He didn't even graduate high school, as far as I know. So, I don't know. He might have got his GED, but it was all lies. And, but he needed to always make it look like there was some kind of interest. And he found a way to get attention by creating this sexuality around it. And so he enticed people through, a very Svengali type method.
What about his brother? Was his brother weird in that area too?
His brother was a locksmith. His brother was, his brother was fine. He has a couple brothers. Most of them are in Ohio. This one was out in California with him. This was the youngest, and David. And, David had his wife and his wife's son. And, so it was a family place. None of that stuff usually came in there. It was like we knew John went to work. Everybody knew what he did. But at the same time, he was laying this seduction trap for me, in the shadows, in the dark. But it started with, trying to befriend my dad, and because he was the sick veteran and he was trying to help. And whatever he did, he made himself look really good at doing it. I'm going to go do this program called Save the Whales. Dawn, do you want to go do it with me? And bring your sister because we want to do everything up and up. But, at the same time, he was being cute around me. A couple of the trips that we took too, another part of the seduction process was like, oh, we're going to go to the beach today. I'm going to show you California beach. Because he took us to places like Grauman's Chinese Theater. We'd never been Hollywood. It was a big deal. And then next thing you know, we drive by and he purposely drives by one of the theaters with his name, the Pink Pussycat, with his name up there and like all the X's. And my sister and I are dying. Right. And so on another day, he says, well, we're going to the movies. So we pull up and we go in to the movie. So this is the first time I actually ever see a porn movie and it happened to be a porn movie with him in it. And we go into this movie theater, and literally my sister and I were just cringing. Like, we're cringing. We're like mortally embarrassed. First of all, our own sexuality is not even developed ourselves, and here we are like in this theater with a bunch of people. I mean, it was embarrassing, and from my perspective, it was embarrassing. I wasn't really a part of like, everybody get up and applaud live sex together. It was just odd. So there he is, and the minute he got on film, and I remember my sister we were just shrinking down in our seats, and the ticket lady was walking back and forth, and because she knew who he was and everybody wanted his autograph, and he was showing off to us. And this is another way I was like, wow, he must be a really big deal. And so he but the minute he opened his mouth and started talking as an actor in the film, I started laughing, like uncontrollable laughing. And I think back on this because, at the time, everything happened so fast. But he jabbed me in the ribs really hard, and it hurt. And then in a couple of seconds, then he started laughing too. So I forgot about the really hard, jab in the ribs that stopped me from laughing, because then he started laughing too. And then we continued laughing. And then he took my hand, and he took my sister's hand, and he pulled us out of the theater, and we left before the movie ever got into it. We just left. And he stopped. He gave a couple people followed him. He gave some autographs, and then we jumped in the van, and we just started laughing. I mean, I don't even think we had a conversation around it. It was just because he was he was really, when he spoke, it was just really forced. It has this crazy, weird, slightly cowboy English accent. It was horrible acting. It was stupid.
It's amazing that they let you go into a porno theater at 15, 16 years old.
With him, they didn't care. Are you kidding? They didn't care.
Now, early you would say that he would leave at night and go out and do some kind of work. Now, was he turning tricks, or was he filming porns?
Well, I thought he was always filming porns. I had no idea about the trick thing then. I didn't know. He talked about having multiple girlfriends. He would brag. And I think he said those things in front of me to see if I would get jealous. And I did, to be honest, because the way he was seducing me, I was thinking, oh, well, he's got a girlfriend, it's like, so why am I thinking that he might like me? That kind of thing. But again, that was him testing. And then one day, I came home from school. I went into the bungalow, and my sister was there. And I said, and she goes, John, I got to ask you something. I said, what? And she says, it's serious. And I said, okay, what? She goes, well, I got to know, do you like John? and I got really like embarrassed, and I thought I was having this, confidential moment with my sister. And I said to her, I said, well, I don't know. He's kind of got these girlfriends and he's married, and I mean, he's older. And I said, but he is kind of cute. And as soon as I said that, that crazy laughter happened, and he comes out of the kitchen laughing. He comes in, he grabs my cheeks, kisses me on the lips, and then leaves the bungalow laughing, into going over to his own place. And it was just like, I knew my sister, she goes, he made me do it. He made me do it. Apparently he brought her over some food, and he said, this is what I need you to do. And so she said, okay. And, but it was like very juvenile stuff like that, that just really began to charm me and make me think, this guy is kind of cute. He likes me. But, you don't do that when you're 15 and you're 32. That's a whole other story. So for him, this was an organized plan. For me, I thought it was organic. I was in my head, I'm thinking, wow, this is real, and all this stuff that just didn't have a clue, about his experience. We weren't on an even keel there. So
yeah, kids have a whole nother world going on in their heads.
Yeah, trust me, you've got a 15-year-old. Now you can expect if that happened from a 32-year-old porn star at the top of his game who could have had anybody, and he was doing that to your daughter, what would you think it was?
How old was your sister?
14.
14. Okay. Oh boy. All right. Yeah. So what happens next?
So, well, I mean, that's part of the stuff that he did, but It took about 6 months, and it was a couple weeks before I turned 16. And he says, all right, because we went to camping to the beach a lot. And he said, do you want to, he says, so, hey, you guys want to go on a camping trip? And I said, yeah, let's go camping. And he said, I'll go get Terry. And, that's my sister. And he said, he says, no, just you and me tonight. And so that's kind of when I knew that, we're going to have our first date. To me, I didn't know for sure, maybe it could go that far, but in your head, you kind of don't really, you don't know what that looks like, but it would be our first time going on a trip alone. So, we told Dad we were going, and we let him think that my sister was going with us, and we didn't. We went by ourselves, and he just made it really romantic. He did everything romantic, with the fire and the meal and the planned sunset right there on the beach by the water, and and the way he approached me, and I agreed to have sex with him. And that's kind of at that point, after that, to me, in my juvenile mind, I'm like, okay, now we're boyfriend girlfriend, because that's what that means. Right
now. Had you even kissed another boy before that?
Oh yeah, okay. I had. That's not. But but like kid kiss, not real kiss, not passionate. You know what I mean? It was different. Completely different.
I understand. Yeah. Okay, so now what goes on next? Because ultimately he gets you out of there, and you're with him now.
Oh yeah, it's at that point that it's like the holding hands every time. Now the minute people aren't looking, he's grabbing my hand, he's putting his arm around me. If we're walking back together, he's giving me a kiss and said, "I'll see you later." He starts arranging more trips to and it starts getting very intense. And I literally, in my book you saw a letter I wrote my mother probably 2 weeks after, and I got really sick afterwards too, because my body and his body were not compatible. Let's just say that. I was a kid, and still not developed. And so he, so I got really, really sick. And I remember just thinking I was dying. I literally thought that I was dying. And, well,
let me ask you too. Now, when you had that experience, then you probably had no one you could talk to about that either.
Well, no, I didn't. No, because it was all supposed to be a secret. And that's the other thing, too. Now it's all woven into this huge secret that we can never tell anybody, right? Because nobody will understand. It's illegal, even though people are cool, you never know, you know what I mean? And so, I didn't want to see him get in trouble and all of those things that you get wrapped up in. And No, I didn't. But fortunately, Harriet, the lady that we were staying with, she saw that I was sick, and she decided that she needed to take me to the doctor. And so I went in and I got some antibiotics, and that helped me after a while. But I couldn't tell her what it was or what caused it. Just that I thought I was sick. So
What would you tell the doctor?
I don't remember. I think
Okay.
I think I just told him that I was having pain, and he gave me stuff for probably urinary tract infection, that kind of thing.
Now, did he know you were having sex?
The doctor?
Yeah.
I don't think the doctor asked, to be honest with you. I don't remember. I don't recall that he asked.
Okay. Now, then, ultimately, though, you guys move in together, I guess, or he left with you. What happened?
Yeah. So, I mean, this does take, so we're hiding and now we're friends, and dad's wife does come, and I know it's a long story, so I don't want to run out of time too, but, my stepmom actually makes it to California, Penn C, and my little brother's not here yet. And so Dad makes the decision to move. My sister went back to Florida to my mom, because maybe we were just not being taken care of. And she would call and talk to my mom. She said, "Mom, I'm hungry. We have no food." And I don't know if you've ever been hungry, but that's when you're hungry and you don't know how to get a job and you don't know how, you have no skills, you can't, that's kind of a scary place to be. And we were both very malnourished in a lot of ways. John brought food, but he didn't bring, 3 square meals a day, So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure
she
it wasn't a healthy diet, because even he looked like he was dying himself.
Yeah, well, yeah. It wasn't really a healthy diet, I guess. It was more snack food, sandwiches and things that you could put together, and treats that he would bring from maybe where he traveled, San Francisco or wherever he went for work. And then he came back and he had jars of, different mustards and frog's legs one time, so it really wasn't healthy stuff, but it was food. We were happy for food. Anyway, sister left. She went back to mom's. Dad's leaving to go with his Thai wife, and he asked if I want to go. And I went with him for a little while, but John called every day, and and I missed him. And I said, "Dad," I said, I think. That's when I told him, I said, "I'm in love with John." I said, "I don't know what to do." And he says, "All right, well, we're going back to Florida." I said, "I don't want to go." I said, I want to still see him. And he said, "Well, here you go. Here's $20. Good luck." And then he left. And I don't know if you know California, but he left, and he left me in Riverside, and I had to hitchhike back over to the apartments, and John's brother was waiting for me there, and I stayed with John's brother for a while, and then ended up eventually moving in with John and Sharon, as they incorporated me into, again, it was like a family thing, except the difference was that John and Sharon were living as brother and sister, and he and I were, I guess, together sexually. It was very strange. There wasn't anything normal about it. There wasn't anything healthy about it. It was just, for me, it was being broken in a broken world. And, that's just what happened. That's what happened. That was my world when I came from a place of neglect and lack of resources that just made me vulnerable to that type of situation. And, I think at best, I got some strength from Sharon and that very strange relationship that we ended up having together. She had this way of pushing me, telling me that I was smart enough to go to school, because I ended up having to quit school because of John. I had to drop out. He was too jealous. I couldn't do that. I couldn't wear makeup. I couldn't cut my hair, which I don't now today. But even back then, if I wanted to, I wasn't allowed to. I couldn't wear anything except for really baggy T-shirts and jeans. I had to, if we went out anywhere where people recognized him, I had to tell everybody I was his niece. Because I was just this shadow person that was that just straggled along. It wasn't anybody that he could. It was like none of it was rational. None of it was right. And none of it was a real supporting, loving relationship for me. It was a control relationship for him.
But you didn't know this is all you knew.
Yeah, it's all I knew. I'm not going to, it took me years and years and years of counseling to understand that I wasn't responsible for that, that I wasn't responsible for where and who I was born in the area I was born into. And, I had the tools that I had to survive were the tools that I had. I wasn't smart enough to figure out that John was grooming me. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that, because at 15 and my body parts are starting to grow, that was going to be, big green lights for people, that's going to target me. I didn't understand that that's what came with my body territory. As a kid, you don't understand that stuff. One day you wake up and all of a sudden puberty and you're like, what's going on? And you don't really understand the repercussions that has in a society that sexualizes women and their bodies.
And back then, like the TV shows were like the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family, right? Were you watching that kind of stuff on TV?
Oh, absolutely. Those were that was my fantasy. I thought for sure that, I related to the Brady Bunch. I knew my dad was going to come back. I mean, I know that the Waltons, good night, John Boy, all that stuff was like real, that was my solid idea of what a family was. And, in a way, I tried to get that. Even in the terrible circumstances that I were. And I'm not the only one that's ever been in a bad circumstances tried to make the best out of it. There are plenty of girls and women that I speak to that have had similar experiences, life isn't kind, and, women are subjectified throughout history. And, we get into these ideas of violence and violence against women and how that even happens. One of the seeds of why that happens is because women and women's bodies are looked at as possessions.
Now, when you were living with the nurse and with John, was there violence in that home?
No, that's the strangest thing. They would fight, but apparently, according to Sharon, too, if John threw something, she threw something across the wall back. And so he was really legitimately a little frightened of her. She was very book smart. I think they told her when she was in high school that she should become a nuclear physicist. She had the IQ to be able to do something like that. But then she had a counselor who said, well, women don't become nuclear physicists. You should become a hairdresser. And she said, well, screw that. I'll become a nurse because society will let me use my brains in medicine as a nurse. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's one of the traditional fields that women could excel. And so she worked on some of the very first open heart surgeries at UC Medical Center and, did the real nursing school with the hats and everything type training. So she was well respected in that area. And she, I don't know, with John, she would always she would give these offhanded threats and she would tell him, I'm Italian. You want to wake up in the morning? Things like that. And he would believe her. At least that's what I sensed. For me, on the other hand, and she was a year older than him. So she was 33 when I met her. So, the two of them had a completely different relationship. It was really, I didn't understand what they were talking about a lot of the time, when they were bantering because, they would, I don't know. I didn't know their backstory. So.
Is she still alive today?
Well, that's another long story. No, she's not. When we get through my story, you'll see that we became very intertwined. And after the murders and after John was arrested and everything. Actually, after he died in 1988, he died of AIDS. She did an article in the LA Times, and I hadn't seen her in a while. And I reached out to the journalist and said, here's my number. And so we reunited, and we talked through a lot of the things that happened, and she became a part of my life again. But she developed early onset Alzheimer's. Her mother had it. It was hereditary. And in 2006, I'd always said, come up. I live in Oregon. I said, come up, Sharon. I'm worried about you. And, me and her, a few friends, recognized that she was starting to show symptoms. And so she came up. In 2006, she called me. She said, I'm ready. And I put her on the train, and I went and got her up here, and she stayed with me. And then I ended up having to be her guardian as she slowly declined. And in October 28th of 2012, she passed away from colon cancer. And I was with her by her side, holding her hand. The last thing she said to me was, I love you, baby. And that was after probably a year of not speaking. So that was quite a journey. It's definitely, I've had a lot of counseling around her as my silent abuser. But in another way, like I said, she gave me a lot of, she encouraged me in a lot of ways that I feel like she was trying to make up for those faults of turning the other way. When she saw that at the point where John became very physically abusive, especially, and it became really obvious that I was his somebody that he controlled and manipulated.
Yeah, just that whole story about reuniting with her must have brought up so many issues for you that could be like a whole 2-hour show by itself.
It's a whole another 2-hour show. Yeah.
Which I think I'm going to get you to come back and do. Okay.
If you want, yeah, we could talk about it. I mean, this is not, you don't have this kind of trauma and in your youth this whole thing with John lasted until I was almost 21, like 2 weeks shy of 21. So we're talking 5.5 years that, at a very vulnerable, impressionable time in my life that has really impacted my life. And, so there's been a lot of counseling.
Yeah, people should just think back to your high school years, your first couple of years of college, or when you just move out of your house, whatever. Those are the most passionate, powerful, intense years of your life. And here's this woman was in the grips of a madman, really, when you're in a mad situation to begin with, from beginning to end. Okay, now, what happens next? I guess next would be drugs, right?
Next would be drugs. Yeah, the marijuana wasn't enough, and he started bringing cocaine home, and of course, again, he was always in control of it. He was in control of the pot. He was in control of everything. So when you smoked weed, it was only when John wanted to smoke weed. If you didn't, if you weren't, I wasn't allowed to do anything like when he wasn't there. That was just not allowed. He would, do those little microaggressions where he wouldn't talk to you for days, he wouldn't bring food, and then you're sitting there going, wait a minute, I don't have a job, I don't go to school, I don't know anybody, I'm not allowed to go anywhere, I have no transportation. And, I think that's where Sharon and I bonded a lot too, because when he got mad and did things like that, he would just take off. And there was a time when I was so emaciated, I was so hungry, I couldn't stay awake. I had malnutrition so bad. I literally, if I sat down, I would fall asleep. I would say 2 words in a sentence to begin a conversation with you and literally fall asleep sitting. And she, as a nurse, recognized that. And so she began feeding me. It's another thing that brought us together. And then we'd start walking the dogs. And then, so when he wasn't there is when she and I started to hang out more. But when he was there, he wasn't, he was the center of attention. He had to have all your time, or that was it. But, I think, when he left and went out, he knew that I would be with Sharon, and that was his nucleus. Nobody in the porn world knew about us. Nobody knew. We knew his family. We knew his mom, his brother. All that stuff. That was very private, and that was his little place that he could go out and lie and tell all these stories about who he was to the porn world and to the people who he slept with. But when he came back there he was, supposed that was his kingdom, in other words.
Well, let me ask you this, though, because he's doing these porn films. He's getting paid from that. Then he's turning tricks on the side to supposedly. And then you got the Sharon. She's a nurse. She's working a job. And then plus they're apartment managers. But it still sounds like you guys had trouble making ends meet. How could that be?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know what John did with his money. I know that once the cocaine got in, it was pretty obvious that that's where it went, pretty quick. But prior to that, I have no idea. And why Sharon, they did money. And I would always just try to earn my keep. So I started collecting the rent, and Sharon would teach me how to do the books and how to give the rent receipts out. And so she was trying to help me with skills. When he was gone too, she would drive me to get my GED. So I got my GED actually.
Oh, wait, we have Dawn Schiller. Dawn Schiller is a fascinating woman. She runs this group called empowerteens.com. And Dawn, why don't you tell us real quick about empowerteens.com? What do you guys do over there?
Well, what we do over here is we try to put up a lot of good information about what causes what social conditions cause an underserved teen, a teen that could be left vulnerable to abuse, neglect, homelessness, human trafficking, crime, suicide, all of those things that happen when you don't have the foundations around you for support. And then we try to develop things like mentoring groups and camps. And we put on camps a couple of years, one for girls, and we want to develop for boys as well. But this one was called Mirrors of Me, Girls Art, Writing, and Mentoring Camp. And there's a little video on the website there to kind of show you what we do. And we have all volunteer faculty come in and teach poetry writing, mask making. There's equine therapy with Cloverhaven, which is a local equine place. I taught a mini memoir writing workshop, and then everybody got a tour of university afterwards, and they were able to present in the theater their works if they wanted to. We did music, they did hip hop if that was a way to express, and then they also got involved with the community garden and community service, and they mentored each other. We did campfires, and they mentored each other, and it was an experience to bring girls who couldn't normally afford to go to a camp like this to come in and learn how that their pasts don't define them, and that to give them the tools to empower them to create a new and better future for themselves.
Okay, great.
Did you hear me?
Yes, I did. I heard you perfectly.
Hello?
Oh, yeah, I did it again. I did it again.
Hello?
Yeah. Sorry. I did it again.
You did it again. I just was like really great. Like
no. I heard you. Everyone heard you. Everyone.
Terrible.
No, everyone heard you. You were great. Because someone from another station's bugging me. Anyway, we just picked up. We just started simulcasting tonight for the first time on People's Internet Radio in Ireland, and we just picked them up. So welcome, guys, to the show. We have with us Dawn Schiller. She's the author of the book. She's the author of the book. The Road
Through Wonderland.
Surviving John Holmes. You can get an autographed copy of that book at empowerteens.com. Okay. I know. So many things going on at once. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I guess the next stage of this story is the drugs.
Yeah. So the drugs.
Wait. What year was this? Because John started using coke. What year was that?
I think it was around late 77, 78. 78 for sure. It started to just once it hit like thunder. It wasn't just an easy breezy every once in a while thing. Although he tried to really control that too and make it sound like he had control of it. Really, he started very quickly doing so much. And when he was like a gargantuan user almost right away. And he was the type of guy that would dole out, here's for you. He'd give his brother a little if his brother was there. And, those lines. And then he would just hoard, always the master, always in control. But he started bringing it back, and he started bringing back like quantities of it. And then he would put us to work like packaging them up. So we realized that he was selling. Again, so I'm 17 at the time, and 17, almost 18. And I'm thinking, he must know what he's doing. Mind you, I have had no schooling since then either, since the 10th grade. I dropped out mid-10th grade. Except I've only had John's schooling. I wasn't allowed to learn how to drive. I was never allowed to learn to drive. I wasn't allowed to go out by myself. And then his controlling and possessiveness got really, really bad pretty quick. And the violence was more physical as opposed to emotional and mental. When he got angry at you or when you didn't do what he asked, he became really paranoid, and he thought that I was flirting with things like busboys when we went out to Bob's Big Boy, or, which I wasn't. And so it became this whole just the classic accusations, and build up to where he was going to hit me. I mean, but he would, push me or not speak to me, and just and slam doors and break things. And then pretty soon after that, I can tell you that the freebase came into the house. And I don't know if everybody's familiar with freebase, but freebase is cooked cocaine that you can smoke. So it's really the original crack. And if you weren't hooked on cocaine when you snorted lines, you were definitely hooked when you smoked freebase by the first hit. And I'm not going to lie that I'm a recovering addict now. I'll have 18 years July 22nd if the planets align, and I'm stay in good graces, I'll make it. But I think that part of my understanding of addiction was during that time, was that whole consumption of cocaine in my mind. And I think for me, as I've counseled myself through the years, it's been understanding that high was very medicinal for me in a lot of ways, because it separated me from just the paranoia and the weirdness and the tension that was around John and that relationship anymore. It was already there very subtly, but I could tell you with the cocaine, it exploded. And I'm very careful when I say this too, because I think that folks have a tendency sometimes to hear this story or hear my story, whether they read the book or they hear me present, because I do present nationally at different conventions around the issues of child abuse. And I want to be very careful not to give John a free pass and say, oh, he became mean and violent because of the drugs. And I want to just really be really clear. I've spent a lot of years dissecting this relationship, but he was definitely violent and controlling and manipulative in a very selfish and self-centered way before he got violent. So I think I want to add that caveat. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Perfect sense. Now, what about the people around John? First of all, was there anybody around him that was saying, hey, little girl, get the hell away from this guy. This is no good for you. You should be doing this. You should be doing that.
No, not in John's world. I was only surrounded by people that he knew that he made sure that he said that I belonged there, that's where I needed to be. He also got his brother hooked on cocaine too. And when his brother needed drugs, that's what he did. He would say, you watch her and tell me what she's doing. If she's doing something, like, you let me know and I'll give you more, you can get more lines, and that's what he'll do. You basically waited for him to dole out lines to you, or the freebase pipe, just so that you could stay high if that was what you needed. And definitely David was addicted. Now, David's sober now too. He is sober and happily married and has children. So, and we've had conversations around this past as well. So, we're in good standings, and we know about this past, and it was hard at the time that, so it really the drugs, it's like a good dealer, like you have your little world, right? You have your little drug dealing world and the people that you own and control. And you're the king. You're the king of it. And people will do what you want because you've got the carrot that they want to eat.
Now, the people around John, were they like bikers, drug dealers, mafia guys? What was it? Rock stars? Who was around him?
Huh. Well, I mean, yeah. So, the people around John that I knew of, I was always had to be hidden. I think that one time he took me in the middle of the night to Hollywood. On Hollywood Boulevard, there was a place where they edited porn films, and there was one of his editors/producers, Bob Chin. And, we went in to pick up some stuff I don't know, he had to pick something up, or probably was dropping off some Coke or whatever to Bob. I don't know. Or money. I don't really know, because he didn't tell me that stuff. And he says, Bob looked at me and says, "Who's that?" He goes, "Oh, it's my niece." So that's the one time that I actually met somebody in that, that was a producer in that world. Then there was, well, there was a couple times that I ran into other people, but not, let's see. Most of the time I had to stay hidden. I mean, I waited outside in cars. I started going on runs. He started to become really paranoid. Let me back up a little bit here, because I'm getting ahead of myself. He was really, I mean, the people that were around him initially when the cocaine came in was just his family. You know, Sharon would like pretend it didn't happen. She would get up and go to work every day and, you know, tell him to clean up the house and et cetera. David was always around. David's wife was around. And that was really it at the complex. And then he would go off and we would wait for him to come back. Then he got the idea of starting this. David was a locksmith, and John had a little shop with a bunch of stuff like yard sales and things like that he'd collected for years. And we opened up this little shop in Glendale, and but he kept stealing all the stuff out of the shop and selling it and going and getting high. So essentially he was a terrible drug dealer because he was smoking his own stuff, right?
Right.
So we would wait. This is at the point where I would wait 2-3 days for him to come back. But when he came back, he would immediately go into the bathroom. And we all were waiting for him to call you into the bathroom to talk to you. And he would call David back there often first. And David would, I don't know, they would talk. And then he would call me back, and I'd go back in there, and he'd dish out a line, and he'd give me a line. And then he'd say, "David told me everything. Where were you?" And I wouldn't know what he was talking about, because I was doing my job in the front, keeping this business together. And, you know, and he says, and at that point, it was really close to that time that he became violent for the very first time. And he punched me, and he broke the glass in the front of the shop. And it was like my world completely crashed. He'd never really full on hit me before. It was always like, you know, yank my hair or push me or, you know, elbow in the ribs or, you know, say something really like cutting and walk away. Not have any food or not see him for a long time. And, you know, until he was ready to forgive you, that type of thing. And, so that was like that explosion happened. And once that happened, he, you know, it was like literally amongst shattered glass and everywhere, and me bloody and crying and saying like, "I don't understand, you know, what happened? What did you do? What did I do? What did I do?" And, you know, he broke down, he was crying, and then he did the "I'm sorry's, you know, I'll never do it again. I'll never do it again." But then after that, and then of course I said, okay, I forgive him, because in my mind, all I wanted to do was go back to the good times where he wasn't hitting, where it wasn't so painful. You know, because I didn't know how to get out of that. That was very, that was overwhelming to me. I didn't know how to stop that. And when he started, you could tell the eggshells. I knew when he was going to hit me, because he would start the fight with an accusation that wasn't true. And I had no defense, because my defense was always, I really didn't do anything, and that was the truth. But it wasn't good enough, because he was just trying to start the fight. And from that time, he started taking me with him. So then he became so paranoid, he didn't trust leaving me at home anymore. And the business just dissolved. And everything got shut down, didn't pay the bills, etc. And David ended up closing it down, his locksmith part. But that was about the time when I really started to lose track of Sharon and being at the apartment complex, because he would literally take me in the car with him for days. And I would have to sit in the back seat, and I would, if he was waiting in front of one of the Wonderland house, or if he was waiting in front of Eddie Nash's house, or in another delivery house, he'd put a blanket over, and he'd give me a can of Coke, you know, and he'd say, "Don't move, you know, if anybody comes, don't move." And I was so paranoid, so fearful, and in my mind, so trapped. Sorry, there's the dog.
Yeah, don't panic. Happens all the time.
Okay. But that I did what I was told. And also he would leave me in the car just a little bit of coke so that I would still say hi enough to be there and still be, still be with an held trapped, by an addiction. So because I was clearly, in my mind, addicted at the time as well, and so there was a lot of stuff he would tell me. We would be in front of houses and he says, oh, here's, that's the manager for the Eagles, or that's, gosh, I can't remember who else now. Definitely
what about
Eddie Nash's house and the
John Phillips, house. John Phillips, Mama Cass, people like that. Why does that sound familiar? It might. I never met anybody. And, for all I know, those were things he would say when he got out in the car. Do you know who that was? And I'm like, no. And, he would say it in a very mean way, as if, don't be so stupid, like I'm doing something important. Those are important people and you're nothing, in that type of a way, so and he would say it after I asked, like, why did you take so long? And I didn't have the right to say that because those people were important and I wasn't. So that's the only reason I remember that. I can remember just waiting outside in cars. I mean, it's not exciting. It's not glamorous at all. And then when he, instead of going back to Glendale, because he started stealing all of Sharon's things, all of her mom's things, her grandmother's things. It was really sad, and pawning it off. And, he would take her credit card and we'd go into the Sears and he'd come back out with like microwaves, and then he'd drive up and I'd wait in front of Eddie Nash's house because he would be selling it to Eddie Nash so that he can come back with some coke. Right? But he would be in there for days getting loaded, and I would have to wait outside. And he would tell me stories about Eddie, that Eddie was, these were really scary people. Don't ask, don't move, don't breathe. Basically, if they know you're in this car, they'll kill you. You can't be seen. The same thing with the house on Wonderland. When I waited in front of the Wonderland house, it was like, it was like he had a disgust for those people. He says, these people are trash. He says, do not let them. They will slit your throat. And later on, I think he was in reference to David Lind, but I didn't know that. I'd never met them, but have you ever been down that street, Wonderland? It's extremely tiny. It's like almost a one-way road, very windy. So it's not like you're parked down the street and you can't see anything. You were parked pretty close. Parking is hard to get. And, when you're parked there for days and days and days, you get to know a place. And yeah, I'm listening.
Okay. So with the drugs, so the drugs got really, really bad. John became really addicted, and he started to get really, and we didn't eat. If he didn't have food, I didn't have food. I did nowhere near the amount of drugs that he did because he wouldn't allow it. I mean, like he needed it himself. But I did enough that I was high, and that I was usually waiting to get high. That was really the most of the time that I spent remembering about being high. I don't really remember being high much. I remember waiting that he would gift me some. And I don't really, this is when we get into some of the really traumatic stuff, to be honest with you, when he gets desperate. And he decides suddenly that he doesn't have any more, there isn't anything else left to steal, from Sharon. What else could he take? Every gift that he ever gave me, whether it was a ring, because in the beginning he bought me a little diamond ring, a birthstone ring, a little fairy necklace. Those things were all gone, sold for coke. Any kind of little knickknack that looked like it would be cute somewhere that I had from a yard sale or whatever, gone and sold. And the same thing for the stuff that with Sharon. So there wasn't anything anymore. There wasn't a place to sleep. We had our things in garbage bags in the car, in Sharon's car, Sharon's Chevy Malibu, and basically trying to get enough money he was selling enough drugs so that we could get a really shabby motel. And he made the decision one day during that time to that the next place that we were going to get money was to tell me what to do to go out on Hollywood Boulevard and earn it by selling my body. And that was quite a violent situation. It was kind of a matter of fact thing that he said, well, this is what we're going to do. And he laid out my clothes. And I said, what are you, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's told me what to say and what people were going to say. And if I asked somebody if they were a cop, they had to tell me to bring him in. And he was going to be waiting in the bathroom. He told me how much to charge. He told me all of those details. And I literally didn't think, because all the while up to that point, he was off and on battering me. It just didn't end. Once the battering started, it never stopped. It was that very classic cycle of abuse where there would be the I'm sorry, the tension, the explosion, the I'm sorry, the tension, explosion over and over and over again. And so the cycle just stayed in this whole idea around him sending me out on the street and giving me these instructions. And he literally, I remember begging with him and pleading, don't do this, because it was just a level of me that I didn't expect. I just didn't expect it. I guess I probably should have if I was connected to the world the way he was, but I wasn't. I really still was surrounded in my mind with this idea that I was his girlfriend and he was going through a bad time. You know what I mean? It was very ignorant of me. But it was, but it wasn't something that I could have changed if I wanted to. I came into this pretty ignorant, I came into it pretty naive. And so what I was trying to hang on to, especially around the beatings, was like, can we just have, where we can laugh, and where he's not hitting me. And that's really very classic around a lot of battered women and other folks who are abused that way. They will stay because they know that if you leave, that's like a really dangerous time. But also the minute it starts to get better, then you feel like, oh, let it just stay like this. If there's something I can do to make it stay like this, So John gets the idea to sell me, and he gets me out on the street the first time. And I'll never forget walking out and he told me what people would do, what to do, just walk down the street at a certain time of night. And he told me that people would pull over, and I guess I didn't believe it. It was still not a part of my consciousness, that existed. People did that.
Now, how was he so familiar with that? Had he victimized other girls before, or it was because he was a client, or because he was walking the streets himself?
He told me when he says, like, I've been selling myself for years, that it's your turn now. I mean, like, that was his rationale. But ultimately, I know his rationale was that I was his property, and he was selling his property. And, and that's historically problematic. But, no, I mean, he desperately needed the money, and I was something that could sell. He told me all of the horrible things a pimp would tell, somebody that he was about to prostitute, that you're sitting on $1 million, that, horrible, demoralizing things like that put all your value in your sex. It had nothing to do with you as a human being. It had everything to do with you as a body part. And so, for me, that's what it was. And when I started I walked on that street the first time, and people were pulling over. And I remember thinking, and then I looked across the street, and I saw somebody else who was doing the same thing as I was doing. And I thought, this world exists. It was almost as if a veil lifted, like the mist had lifted, and I saw another world that had been there all along. But maybe I just refused to look at, or I just didn't understand. I don't know. But it was really horrifying for me. And then the whole experience was traumatic. And John's MO would be that, when the person left, he took all the money, and then he would start a fight with me. He would punch me out. He would beat me. And then he would bathe me and tell me he was sorry. And then he would rape me because he had to take ownership of me again. Because somebody else had me and now he had to have me back.
And you were about 18 years old.
I was, yes.
You see, he was still a little kid. Now, people should keep this in mind, too. I live in Las Vegas here, and people, a lot of times, they'll make a joke, and they'll say, hey, Ed, can you hook me up with this? Can you hook me up with that? I'm coming to town. And people should keep this kind of thing in mind when you ask me that question, okay? And then, because I don't really appreciate it. And this is the kind of thing that goes on. And someone may look like they're smiling or whatever, but trust me, this is a brutal, abusive situation that is no joke.
Yep. And I was told what to do. And if I didn't follow his rules, I mean, I was more afraid of him than anybody out there. But, the truth is it's an extremely scary, vulnerable place to be. And girls out there in those positions, a lot of times people don't care about them. A lot of times the people who are out there looking for them and picking them up, they know that, and they will hurt them. And those are the ones that end up dead and missing for years and years and years, bodies never found.
Yeah, that's another thing that's all too common, too. A lot of people go missing and, anyway.
Yeah, you're the expendable person now because now you've become subhuman when you're like that to the world.
How long did this stretch of period of activity go on?
Well, it lasted for, until the Wonderland murders and the arrest. So where are we with time? Because I guess I can go on, can't I?
We got just about a half hour.
About a half an hour. So pretty soon around this time too, John, I share with folks too that not only that was the first time, but then he got more clever and just more creative in the ways that he could sell me, because he not only did it at streets, he would go to different streets and he would send me out there. And I had a pattern that I knew when he was going to start to ask me. I knew it. And I would start to panic, and I would start to beg, and I would start to get really nice and go light him a cigarette and do all those things to make, maybe calm him down so he wouldn't, make me do it. And it usually didn't work. And so I would try to run. And most of the time I didn't make it because I had the long hair. He always managed to grab my hair and pull me down and batter me, and then it was it. I was kind of stuck, and I was literally a shell of a person. At one point, we got out of this hotel, and he says, "Come here." He says, "Come pack this stuff in the trunk." And I went in the back to hand him the garbage bag of our clothes, and he grabs me instead, throws me in the back, and shuts the lid. And I'm in the back of the trunk, and he's driving. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know how the hell, where am I going? What do I do? And there's this little hole, I can see the wheel, and I'm thinking, just breathe, because I felt like I was going to suffocate. So I just kept focusing on breathing. And he would pull up to this big apartment complex, one of the apartment complexes near a freeway. And again, he never allowed me to drive. I never knew where I was. And this apartment complex had, multiple units that were similar. And he brought me to this one lady that house. And I thought, oh, good, she's going to be nice. This is a lady, and he won't hit me in front of her, because he never hit me in front of people. That was a thing. If we were out in public or whatever, he would make sure to hold my hand, so people thought he was really sweet, all those things. And he ends up right away, they get high together, they do freebase together, and I'm sitting in the living room, and then they call me in, and he says, well, you're going to stay here with Michelle for a while. And I said, well, why? And she just looked at me and said, shut the fuck up. I didn't tell you to talk. And so essentially I thought, oh my gosh, this is like another John, but in a woman's body. And he left me there, and lo and behold, she was, she had a little brothel going on there, and she was even more cruel than him. There are lots of bits to the story, and there's, certainly I write about it more in depth in my book. And, we don't have a lot of time to get into all the details, but so that was another way that he trafficked me, and I got away from her by running. And, that's another story. I ran to, he was gone one day and she was gone one day, and I managed to call my mother. I snuck a call into my mom, and she had a bus ticket waiting for me. And, he came in one day and he got in the bathtub and he said, "Get me a cup of coffee." So I went to get him a cup of coffee. And for some reason, she had left the sliding glass door open, and I saw the curtain, the breeze of the curtain, and it blew in. And I realized, and I told him, I said, "I'm coming, or coffee's coming," whatever I said. And for something just told me, run, run, run. You've got that ticket waiting, run. So I ran to the nearest Denny's, and I called my mom, and she was, I had the ticket, and through a lot of help from people, and I wrote about it in my book, but from a lot of help from people, I managed to get to the bus station, and the bus station, and this was in 1981, but in the bus station, the guys there, the ticket guy said, I told him, I said, "This guy's going to be after me and he's trying to kill me." I said, "You got it. Not tell him I went on a different bus. Don't tell him who I am. You saw me." And sure enough, when I get there, he says, "That guy you were describing, he was just here." I said, "What'd you tell him?" He said, "I told him you were on the bus to Vegas." And so he's following a different bus. And so I got on the bus without a hassle, and I made it up to Oregon, where I'm at now, to my mom's. And I was not, I literally couldn't tell anybody anything that happened to me.
Real quick, when you first called your mom and told her the situation you were in, what was her reaction?
Well, I didn't tell her everything. Okay. There's no way you could just go, "Oh, by the way, John's prostitute." I didn't even tell them that. I said, "Mom, he's hitting me. He's hitting me. We have no food. We're homeless. I don't have anywhere to go." And that's all I had to say to her,
Okay.
And she's like, "Don't worry. There's a ticket. Can you get there?" I mean, she was pretty powerless herself. She is not a woman that felt like, she's not, she doesn't really speak the language still that well, English. She just didn't feel like she had a lot of say so in this country. She was always worried about herself.
Now, this escape, was this after the Wonderland murders or before?
No, just before. So I want to actually say a little bit before. So trafficking me in the brothel was another way, but another way that was really common with him as well during that time, that 2-year period, was selling me to Eddie Nash. And he did that really twice. And this was also a time just before I ran. He did it on my 20th birthday, and then on Christmas Day. And they're really within a 2-week time frame from me, or 1 week time frame from each other. So what he did was he set me up to tell Eddie that you're my niece, you're from Oregon, you're younger than you are, because at that age, I was supposed to be 18 and I couldn't be any older because then I was too old for him, apparently. I had to pretend that I didn't know anything about drugs. I had to pretend, and he said, "Eddie's going to test you." And he said, "If you fail," he said, "he will cut your head off, chop your arms off and your feet, and nobody will ever be able to identify. Your bones will be in the desert with everybody else that's out there." And so literally very, very scared. And it wasn't that I had made up those rumors about Eddie. I'm sure other people had heard those things too. So I believed him, and I was really nervous when he brought me in there, and his bodyguard Dials was there, just as John told me, and he said there's a 2-way mirror, and they're gonna put money and jewelry and drugs in front of you on the table, and they're gonna wait and they're gonna watch and see if they can trust you. And sure enough, I knew that was happening, so I for sure didn't touch anything. And I waited for hours in that living room, and then finally Eddie called me back, and just had that experience. So that happened Christmas Day, and then on my birthday, 1980. And that was before the Wonderland murders too. But after that, from that brothel is where I ran and made it to Oregon, and with my mom's. And John knew I'd made it here right away, and he started trying to call, and he called every day, 8, 9, 10 times a day, and I refused to talk to him. I thought for the first time, I was like, I felt like away from him, and like I couldn't tell anybody what had happened. I was really felt shameful and guilty. And my mom didn't have a full idea of everything. Neither did my sister, who had known him before, the guy who provided all this food and, gave her candy bars when she was hungry. She still had a very, a connection, she liked him. So with all the calling and stuff, I said I refused. And so finally my mom says, just talk to him. Just talk to me. He would send boxes and boxes of pictures and he had my little dog, my little Chihuahua, and he says, oh, he misses you and he wants you. And so I did have to run and leap without him. He actually took him from me as a way to manipulate me because he knew I cared about that dog. But he kept him. And so eventually I broke down after about 6 weeks and I started talking to him, and he was this sweet, syrupy guy again. And my mom said, it was my family kept saying, he's not so bad. And maybe it was just the drugs. And, I had no counseling. Nobody knew anything about counseling then. Nobody realized the depth of what I'd gone through. And quite frankly, this has taken me a lot of years of counseling to figure out myself, but I agreed to go back. And I said, all right. He says, I promise you there's no more drugs. There's nothing. I promise you. He said, Sharon misses you. I've made up with her. She forgives me. We're going to go back and, it's going to be good again. And I said, all right. So still not having any other relationship to compare it to, not within my family for sure. There wasn't a good relationship example. So I went back thinking that was like the best thing that I had available to me. And the minute I arrived at the Burbank airport, he picked up a suitcase off of the conveyor belt that wasn't mine. And I thought, oh, shit. He hasn't changed. It was all a lie. And at that moment, plus looking at him, his eyes were red. He was still really skinny. And, I just, I felt really bad. But anyway, he says, no, it's okay. I promise. And it was within those 3 days. He says, I just have one more deal. And it's true what I told you. I promise we're getting out of here. I'm not doing any more drugs, just this one time. And then he breaks out the cocaine. And he says, this is it. This is the last of it. So it was just all a lie. But he managed to get me back. And I felt like an idiot. I felt like a fool. But I was trapped, and I thought, I don't know. Like, I guess in my head, I thought, well, I'll call my mom to let her know what's going on. But he says, I'm going to go back. He showed up with this huge pile of cocaine, like a night or two after I got there.
When you say like a huge pile, like a 5-pound bag of sugar, give you an idea. Like a 5-pound bag of sugar. Okay.
Gosh, yeah, like pretty much like that. Like it was the biggest pile I'd ever seen, and it was wrapped in newspaper and plastic. It was
right.
It was like
some people would think an ounce is huge, but I'm just trying to.
Yeah. So, but anyway, when I got there, he, like I said, we spent the night together, and then he went to take off. He says, I've just got this last deal. And then he doesn't show up, right? Because he's gone a long time. And I'm thinking, I'm going to call my mom. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? So I get kicked out of the motel room, and I'm sitting on the side of the street waiting to get not knowing what to do. And here, it was a really bad part. It wasn't like a nice hotel. It was another really rundown in a bad part of town. And this woman in this bus with like a Christian theme picks me up, and she says, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, no. I said, I got kicked out. Like, I trusted that my boyfriend was changed, and I flew down from Oregon, and he just abandoned me again. So she picked me up, and she took me in, and I did some painting work for her in exchange for a place to stay. And then I called John's answering machine. I told him where I was, and I said, I don't know what's going on, but this is what happened. And so he shows up, and that's when he shows up to her place with this huge pile of cocaine that was insane. And after he does that, he comes back, and then the next night he's like, well, I want to, I got to go get rid of this now. And this is the last thing. And that's when he takes off. And that's the night of July 1st. And that's when he doesn't come back, and I'm waiting in a different hotel for him now, waiting. And he doesn't come back. And then when he finally does come back, he's got nothing. He doesn't talk. He's got like scratches on his neck. It looks like scratches on his neck. His eyes are like swollen and bloodshot. Really, the color is drained from his face. And he has maybe some pennies in his pocket, like not even enough to get like a soda from the machine. And I think he must have gone to see Sharon, because Sharon, as a nurse, always had Valium at home, because he had some Valium in his pocket. And so he pops a couple Valium and he just goes to sleep. And he didn't tell me a thing. He doesn't tell me what's going on, anything. And he just lays there and he falls asleep, and he starts having these dreams about blood, and he's tossing and turning like violently in his sleep. And that, and I'm awake waiting, because he didn't come back until morning. And I'm watching the news on the TV, and I watched them pull the bodies out of the Wonderland house on the news that day, and he's still in this like very restless sleep. He wakes up. I go, John, that house, did you know those bodies? And he says, those people. I said, those are your friends. And he just didn't talk. And he just like, he just like was like, not like him at all, always talking and gregarious, but totally stone face and like almost in shock. So from the way he's, trained me through the years, I don't ask a lot of questions. I just don't ask a lot of questions, because I figure, well, he'll tell me when he's ready, and I'm just praying and I'm hoping it's okay. But I've got this really bad feeling, because, nobody's ever this is the first time there's been death. And I'm like, how do I call my mother now? Like, how do I, what do I do? What does this mean? So, but everything just happens so fast. So within a couple of days, we stay in this hotel, and within a couple of days, we're just holding up, not doing anything, without any plans, and not talking about it, and watching the news constantly and how it unfolded on TV. And there's an explosion, and I jump into the air and land in John's lap, thinking that we've just been shot. And it's the police yelling freeze, and the door of the motel room just went straight down. I guess they knocked the whole thing down, and they had guns to our head, and they took us in, and they said, you're under arrest, and et cetera. And they separated us, and they, cuffed us and took us separately in and interrogated us, and began to show us pictures of people like Eddie and people from the Wonderland gang and the Wonderland house. And John always said, we never trust the police. We don't say anything. We don't trust the police. So I was doing what I was told and not saying anything. And they asked me, did I know these people? And I said, no. Like I said, the house looks familiar, but no. So they let me go, and they keep John. And I had nowhere else to go. And they said, well, where do we take you? And I said, can you maybe call Sharon and see if I could stay there until I can get a hold of my mother. And so I they drove me to Sharon's, and they dropped me off, and they talked to Sharon about what's happening, that they had her husband and et cetera in protective custody. And they said, do you know her? And she said, yes, I know her. And can she stay here? Yes, she can stay here. And so that's how that happened. And we get a call. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go a little bit fast, because I know we're running out of time, but
we got about 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they ask, really, I think that evening we get a call, and it's John calling from jail, and he's saying, they're going to kill me in here. You have to do something. You have to do something. My life's been threatened. And Sharon took the call, and she says, John, I don't know what you want me to do. I can't do anything. I have no money. You took all of that. It was that kind of conversation. And she got off the phone, and she told me, he says he's going to die if we can't get him out. And I said, well, Sharon, what do we do? She goes, I don't know. And so it wasn't much longer, maybe an hour, not much longer after that, we get another call, and it's the police, and they said that they've arranged to put John in a secret location in protective custody, and because he's willing to work with the police on information exchange, but he will not speak unless both Sharon and I are with him. So they bring us they said, are you willing? We said, okay. So they came and picked us up. They took us down to the Bonaventure Hotel, downtown LA. And they took us up the service elevator separately. We went into a room, we were searched, and then we were into another room where John was. And he took Sharon into the bathroom and had a conversation with her and came back out. And then he took me into the bathroom and he said to me, he said, I need to know if you will go into the witness protection program with me. I'm going to tell them everything I know, and it's the only way that we'll be safe. And I said, well, what about Sharon? What did Sharon say? And he says, I just talked to her and she said yes. And I said, well, and I started thinking, I don't have anything else. This is all I have. And in my mind, as if we got away from the bad people, then we could go off and be okay. It was still very broken thinking. But that is where my mind was. And so I said, okay. So they held us there. Sharon and I, we stayed in the room, and she just basically looked out the window, and I played cards, and they had John in another room doing, having conversations with authorities. And probably about the second day, they came in and told us, they said that, that Nash's people and some other people, so John was going to, throw a dime on quite a few people, apparently, not just Eddie Nash, but on a lot of different organized crime folks. So, they know where you are, so we need to move you. So they take us all separately, and we're like bodyguarded out of there in the service elevators at different times. And then we're taken to the presidential suite at the Biltmore Hotel downtown, and where he meets with Vandy Camp and a lot of the different officials in LA officials to meet with them. But we were taken in separate ways, and, obviously armed officers protecting us, as John's going to give up all this information. And Sharon and I are just like barely speaking, but just not, it was just surreal, to be honest with you. It was really surreal. After the third day, John comes in to the room after they've been hours and hours talking. He comes in, he goes, well, pack your things, we're going. And we looked at him and said, what do you mean? And he says, well, we're going home. I said, well, I thought we were going. And he says, nope. He said, nope. And the officer came in. He says, nope, Johnny Boy didn't tell us what he wanted. He just strung us along. And so that was the end of that. So they said they let us go home. But I really think looking back, it was a strategy on their part, because John really thought he was going to bluff him. He thought he was going to give him a little bit and get into the program and, get all these freebies and get out of debt and get out of all of this stuff. And but not really tell on anybody, because what he was really scared of was, Eddie and all of those people. So they let us go, and he's scared to death. He knows that people know that he was snitching. And so he's scared to death. And he says, we have to go on the run. And Sharon says, what? I guess he told me that Sharon said she was going to meet us later, but we were going to take off first. So he cut his hair off, and Sharon and I dyed it black. We spray painted the Malibu, and, with like terrible spray paint. And we snuck off and headed off out to Florida. And we went to Florida because I said, well, I used to be from Florida, and that's, I kind of, maybe that'll be a good place for us. It seemed like it was better than California all along. So really, I had no connections in Florida other than my old neighborhood. And so that's really, it was a very vague connection, but it was all we had. So we decided to go there, and we ended up down, he broke into some cars along the way, stole a gun. And then we touched base with his sister in Montana as we were driving through, and his mom from Ohio called us and said, the FBI and police are here, were here a minute ago, and they said that you and Dawn are on their 10 most wanted list as armed and drug crazed. And, so we were not only on the run from contracts that John knew and the police told us before were out for us, and me only because I was associated with him. So really, I was inconsequential. I was like, if I got caught and tortured, it would just be used as a tool to get to John. It really wouldn't have been anything. that I did. You know what I mean? It was just being stuck in the crosshairs. And so now we were also on the run from the FBI. And we made it down to Florida, and we made it down to this Miami Beach, this transition hotel called the Fountainhead. And we walked in as, and John, hi, I'm a handyman. This is my girlfriend, Dawn. She's really good at cleaning rooms. You got any jobs? And, in exchange for rooms, and Big Rosie. And she was, it was kind of a little transition hotel where people were in the middle of divorces, were staying for a little while, people down on their luck and, could afford a room once or twice, a week at a time, however they were earning money, they stayed there. Big Rosie kind of looked out for him. And so so I got a job cleaning rooms, and he got a job on some construction down the street. And, there, he pretended that we were just some nice couple that didn't do anything. We weren't supposed to tell anybody anything. We couldn't tell them anything about the past because we were completely undercover. And somehow or other, Sharon was going to meet us. But, during that whole time, John was very tense. He was very moody. He was very sharp. He was starting to, I was really careful because I didn't want to do the eggshell thing with him again and get beat, because I knew, any minute he was ready to snap. And he started to get violent down there again. And he started to start pushing me and smack me. And then it was the I'm sorry's again. But then he says, he got really paranoid. And I started thinking, is he getting high, from his job site or something? I wasn't, in my head, I was trying to make excuses, but I think he was just a batterer. And it happens whether or not you're high or not. And he was, I guess, scoping the area, and he figured out that the beach was another place where he could sell me. And so he took me, he did the whole thing like he did in Hollywood. And he said, you need to go down there. You need to walk in front. I'll be walking behind you. I will give you a nod if that's the right person, etc. And so the whole cycle started again with me begging not to, me trying to run, him catching me at the door by my hair, knocking me down, hitting me, I'm sorry. And then, the whole 9 yards started happening. And this happened for about, not long, for about a month. And it was happening one day. And he said, he says, you got to go out again on the beach. And I'm like, John, no, I can't. You don't, and I started the begging process of, I can't do this. And then I started to run. And this time I made it out the door. For some reason, I ran faster than I had before, at a better timing, and I made it out the door. I ran down the stairs. I ran in front of the snack shop where all of the local people, Big Rosie and, Italian Joe and everybody who was kind of living there and working there, and his son down by the pool. And John caught up to me in front of everybody, grabbed me by my hair as always, and threw me down, beat the crap out of me, and dragged me back upstairs. And that was the very first time he had ever done it in public. And I felt like this, now people really know who he is, because I don't know how to explain it, but when you were around somebody who had that much power and could batter you like that, and who you felt like you were pretty powerless around, you didn't feel like you had any escape, and you didn't feel like you could tell people because no one would believe you. That's the stuff he would say to you too. And so they waited the next day. And they said, they waited for him to go to work, and I heard a knock at the door, and my face is pretty battered up this time. And so I'm kind of trying to hide it behind the door. And I didn't want them to see, my eye and my cheek and stuff. And, Big Rosie just barges in. She goes, is he gone? And I said, yeah, why? And she goes, pack your shit. You're getting out of here. And I'm not kidding you. There was a lady that I used to babysit her daughter. She was in a divorce, and she was getting a house, and she says, it's final right now. You can come stay with me and take care of my daughter. But that asshole's never going to hit you again. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know if I'd ever broke away from him. So, if anybody ever knows where Big Rosie is, and if Big Rosie is listening, I'm forever indebted to you.
And then you called the cops and turned him in? You called the cops and turned him in?
Well, that's what happened. Kind of, sort of. I took the gun that he had stolen. I took that with me because now I'm scared for me. I thought if I take it from him, then he can't come after me with it. Right. So so I felt like that was going to keep me safer. So I took it with me, and we went and we stayed. And then I called my mom right away, and I said, Mom, I got away from him. This is where I'm at. I was able to talk to my family. And of course, being on the run from the FBI, they're waiting at your family's house to hear from you. They know you're going to eventually call somebody, right? Well, so I get a call a couple days later. Oh, your brother's in town. I'm haven't seen you in a long time. He says, hey man, let's go have a beer in the park. I've been so worried about you. Mom told me you got away from John. I'm so glad. And I said, great. And so he pulls up in his rent-a-car. He's younger than me. And I'm like, how do you get this car? He says, we were raised here. I know people. I said, all right. So we go and pull into this park. And as we go into the park, he says, I got something to tell you. And I said, what? He says, well, the FBI actually sent me down here and they're waiting to talk to you. So he essentially, yeah.
We love you. Okay. Everybody in the chat room is loving this, man. You have had a life. You have had a life.
I've had a life.
And you've come out of it great.
I'll finish up really quick for this audience because, I'm sorry that the last audience didn't get to hear all of it. But anyway, so I pulled in and my brother told me this and he said it with concern. He really, he cared and he didn't know that the FBI was bringing me in. But I stopped and it was Tom Lang. And Tom Lang, I don't know if everybody knows, went on to be famous for the O.J. Simpson Bronco ride. In that case. But anyway, Tom Lang was on our case. And I just did an investigative discovery piece where he was interviewed, and he did a really very supportive piece on me, and it was nice to hear from him. But so Tom Lang was there and a couple other officers, and they said, hi, Ms. Schiller, we're happy to meet you. We understand that you finally broke away from John, and we're really happy to hear that. He's a really, really bad guy. And I said, I know, thank you. And I just immediately started crying, and they said, we really know that, you realize that you're still in danger, that we can tell you there's at least 8 contracts out on both of you from some other really, really bad people. And we need to, you need to be separated from him. And as long as he's free, you're still going to be connected and there's still going to be those contracts out on you. He says, nobody really cares about anything that you did. You didn't, you were wrapped up with this guy. We understand. But if we get him off the streets, he's actually going to be safer with us than he is going to be on the streets. And tearfully, I said, look, the address is in my purse. And I kind of just fell to the sidewalk and sat down and started emptying my purse, looking for this card. And I, for some reason, think this was funny in my mind. It was a little surreal, but I said, oh, and I have his gun, and I pulled it out and I set it down, and they got all nervous and, went to move for their pieces. And I was like, no, this is for me. I know it's stolen, but I need this. And they didn't question me on that. I gave him the address, and essentially I said, call me when you have him. He's not armed, because this is all he had. And so they said, thank you very much. And he says, we're glad you're getting out of this, and we hope you get your life together. And if you ever need anything, call us. And so they did hand me their cards, and I kept those for a long time. I never called anybody, but that meant a lot to me. I mean, for a long time, it was the police were bad. The police were bad. They were never there to help you. But they actually were. They really were, as I look back and as I work with law enforcement today. But
well, ultimately, John was charged with murder, right? But he beat the case.
He was. Yeah. And they called me and they said, you were right. He was there. He pretty much expected us to come. We got him, and he's on our way. And I said, okay. There was, and they brought him over. And then, the rest of the story is still another book, but it's parts of it are in the end of this book too. So you find out kind of how I resolve John a little bit.
Okay, Dawn, you got to come back. Okay. We'll do another 2 hours. My God, I love you. I love you so much. Thank you so much for bearing your heart like this. You're a real sweetheart in real life. People should know that.
Yeah. Well, I want people to know that, I do spend my career. I mean, I just got my master's in women's studies. I've been teaching advocacy and activism around the ideas of social justice. I care about why this happens to women, why this happens to marginalized people. And I really feel like there are ways that we could change things systemically as a community and as a society, and to no longer blame the victim and support those people, and then find out the reasons why violence occurs, and to protect and support our kids who aren't born with the support that they need to be, strong and caring and good adults.
empowerteens.com. If you buy a copy of the book from that website, Dawn Schiller, The Road Through Wonderland, Surviving John Holmes, if you go to that link and buy the book, 10% or some percentage goes to help the group. Plus, it comes autographed.
Yeah. To put on another camp. We'd love to do another mentoring camp. It means a lot to these kids. Thank you.
Dawn, thank you so much, okay? Keep in touch.
Yeah. Thank you, Ed. All right, take care.
Bye.